I was really surprised when a couple parishes ago a catechist approached me, and she had been approached by a family of one of our kids, preteen, if I remember the age range correctly. And the surprise was that he was really struggling in school, and a lot of this had to do with having a lot of high anxiety. It was a surprise because it really didn't manifest itself when he was around the parish. And this person had a little bit of background in education as well, and I began to ask her how she was helping him and the family work through this issue with him. And she said a couple things that she found that always was helpful when somebody was anxious was first to ask the question, have you been anxious about whatever it is that you're worried about before? And most of the time the answer was yes. And then the next question was, well, how did that go? And sometimes it was almost like the worst case scenario would have come up. And it's like, okay, you survived that pretty well. Most of the time, though, nothing ever got close to the worst, the second worst, or third worst case scenario. And so it was like, well, maybe what you're worrying about is really very far-fetched, and just to gain some perspective from that. But the other reason I remember this is because the other part of this was teaching people, especially kids, there's simple ways that you can just relax yourself when you're feeling all that anxiety and almost panic and whatnot. And it's just to do a little time out, take some breath, just do something that's relaxing. And the reason she was so excited about this, she goes, unlike in a public school, I can teach our own kids, just pray the Our Father. And just those 10 seconds will really not only help you calm down, but in that prayerful way, connect you to the God who definitely doesn't want you anxious. That experience of anxiety, I think, is something that, whether it's really serious or in various ways, we all can relate to that. And especially in the image of these stormy seas that we heard first in the gospel, but really it carries through several of our scriptures today. And it is our experience of how things can feel very chaotic inside of us, churning inside of us, and how fears, anxieties, and worries can really do a number on us. And especially because while there's lots of things that can be churning around outside of us, it's the inner storm that I think is what's most disturbing in our experience. Now, we can turn to different ways of coping with this, at least as I've seen this. Pretending it doesn't exist is always one way that we can just say, all those storms around me, inside of me, I'll just act like they're not there, and then they just go away. Creating our own I call little micro world, where it's like, okay, I'm going to try to control my environment, what I'm exposed to, whom I'm around, and in that way, that keeps things calm. And most of the time, just to distract ourselves. Well, if I focus on other things instead of the things that I'm worried about or what's going on inside of me, then somehow, again, it'll kind of go away. But we know from the experience of the disciples in today's gospel that those are not really good options, ways of coping. They don't work. And the basic reason they don't work is the fears, the anxieties, the churning seas, they don't go away. So the disciples, it wasn't like, oh, I don't think I can ignore this storm that's come up, and I'm not going to jump out of the boat. That's not going to make things better either. So you're kind of trapped in this experience. There's no way you can pretend your way out or create enough of your own environment or distract yourself. Sooner or later, we all have to deal with these storms that we feel, again, particularly inside of ourselves. We just can't escape it. So, how do we deal with this? Well, the scriptures are help for this. And really, when we look at this from the image of the churning waters, the first thing we do is we go to Genesis 1, chapter 1. There was the wind that swept over the waters, and the creating God of love starts exerting his power and his creative forces over those to begin to put the world in its order, to bring out light, and then to put order into the waters, the lands, and eventually the life that can live in that environment. That, especially that part of nature, as well as all of the world in all of its layers of reality, is what God is talking to Job about today. That all these waters were tamed, and that the power of God over all nature that he created is what Job needs to focus on. Job's basic question is, how can a good person suffer? And where are you, God, in all that? And this is part of God's response through many chapters, the later part of the book of Job, in which he says, so I'm God and you're not. And so he goes through all these ways, particularly in this passage today, to say, I'm the one with the power. I'm the one with the power. And so why don't you leave the power part to me instead of questioning it just because you don't understand it. You don't see the whole picture. You don't see all the ways that I do love you and care for you. And God revealed that fullness of that to us, of course, in his Son. And we see today in this gospel passage that when Jesus rebukes the waters and everything calms down, that he is not just this great prophet and wise teacher, that he is the Son of God, and that he does share the power over all of nature, all of creation. The little hint that we already get is he's not asleep. It's not like, it seems like God's asleep in our lives sometimes, but he's sleeping on the cushion. That's the place of the captain of the boat, and that he's in charge. He is watching over all things. And that the faith that we have in Jesus, particularly to address anything that is churning inside of us and our fears and anxieties, it is he and he alone that has the power over all the things that are driving that outside of us and inside of us, that we can live in his love and his peace. When we trust that God has the power, that's how we have faith. And there's a couple ways in our faith experience that I think specifically helps us, particularly as we just continue to learn to stay focused on Jesus. If you want to distract yourself from the storms, it's not really a distraction. Look at the greater reality, which is Christ that is with us. Christ on the cross. For us who are Catholics, the crucifix is so important because it's like Jesus saying, look, I'm not going anywhere. I'm nailed to this thing. I'm with you in your suffering. I'm with you in your anxieties. And that he is accompanying us in an ongoing way and present to us, in which we can, in our faith in him, experience that peace. And then in the Eucharist, everything that we do in the Eucharist is gathering around his word and at the altar, focused on Jesus, and that everything is centered around him. And it's a wonderful way in which we see the power of God in our midst. As he says, I want you to know how much I am with you by being present in the Eucharist. And we all know this. So many of you have shared this with me over the time here, is to say my experience of Eucharist at the end, when I go forth, I really hear those words and they speak true to me. Go in peace. This is the beauty of our faith, of allowing Jesus we're in the boat, he's in the boat with us. Yes, there are stormy seas, there's all the churning inside, but Jesus is always with us. And he has the power over all the forces around us and inside of us. The other reason I remember this situation with this young man, the catechist, the whole family and the other reason it was a surprise for me, was that he was actually one of our best servers. And so when I found out that there was experiencing a lot of anxiety, I was troubled by that because I never saw that. You would think somebody who's real anxious wouldn't be able to serve. And so I was asking the catechist, why do you think that is? And she said, well, if you think about it, it makes sense. First of all, the church is a real safe place, very supportive, and it's where his whole family is there with him. The Mass has that routine about it, that it's very predictable, and so that part makes a lot of sense. And then she said, and if you think about it, probably the other thing is, of course, during Mass, there's Jesus.